The holographic display flickered with the familiar blue-white glow of archived military footage, casting angular shadows across the xenopsychology laboratory's curved walls. Dr. Kethvar adjusted 3 of his 6 optical sensors to better focus on the tactical data streaming past his colleagues' mandibles. Another day, another species to dissect psychologically. The humans had provided such wonderfully straightforward material lately. Standard aggression patterns, chittered Dr. Vexhai from across the research pod, her crystalline voice carrying the same bored precision that had analyzed 17 different sapient species over the past galactic cycle. Notice the immediate weapon acquisition, the formation clustering, the territorial positioning. Textbook primate dominance behavior. Kethvar nodded with the mechanical satisfaction of a researcher whose theories were being validated. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. The footage showed exactly what their models predicted. Bipedal mammals reacting to simulated combat with instinctive violence, crude tactics, and the sort of emotional decision-making that had kept most species confined to single-planet civilizations for millennia. The physiological stress responses align perfectly with our mammalian aggression frameworks, added senior analyst Threndau, his gelatinous form pulsing with academic enthusiasm. Elevated heart rates, increased respiratory function, adrenaline flooding. Classic fight-or-flight activation. Very predictable. Very primitive. The assembled researchers murmured agreement. Humans had been such a pleasant change from the Zephyrians, whose concept of warfare involved extremely polite written challenges delivered 6 months in advance, or the Quellen Collective, who simply divided into smaller collective units when faced with conflict, making military analysis unnecessarily complicated. "Run the next sequence," Kethvar commanded, already mentally composing the preliminary report. Human Combat Psychology, a study in predictable violence. It practically wrote itself. The hologram shifted to show a different angle of the same training exercise. More running, more shooting, more of the delightfully straightforward tactical responses that would make their threat assessment so refreshingly simple. Until... Wait. Dr. Vexhai's voice sharpened to the frequency she reserved for equipment malfunctions. Replay that section. Grid reference 77 Alpha. The display rewound, focusing on a peripheral figure the automated systems had flagged as Combat Participant, Human Female, Designation 4-7-7. She stood in front of what appeared to be an educational writing surface, completely motionless while explosions erupted around her position. "Equipment malfunction?" suggested Threndau hopefully. "Temporal lag in the recording apparatus?" Kethvar magnified the image. The human female, middle-aged by their standards, wearing civilian attire rather than military gear, remained utterly still as simulated enemy, fire traced patterns mere meters from her location. Her companions dove, rolled, and returned fire with typical mammalian intensity. She continued staring at the writing surface. "Is she paralyzed by terror?" Vexhai wondered aloud. "Some form of psychological breakdown?" "Run biometric analysis," Kethvar ordered, though his certainty about straightforward human psychology was beginning to develop hairline fractures. The display overlaid biosignature data onto the frozen human. Heart rate, steady. Respiratory pattern, normal. Stress hormones, baseline levels. Brain activity, elevated in regions associated with mathematical processing. Mathematical processing. "She's calculating," Threndau observed, with the bewildered tone of someone whose worldview was being gently disassembled. During active combat simulation, while under direct fire, the writing surface became visible as the display resolution increased, Equations. Dense, complex equations covering every available space, with new calculations being added in real time. The human's hand moved steadily, ignoring the chaos erupting around her, filling margins with symbols that made Kethvar's translation implants work overtime. Theoretical physics, Vexhai identified, her crystalline voice taking on an edge of professional interest. Advanced mathematical modeling. This appears to be unified field theory? A comfortable silence settled over the laboratory as three highly trained xenopsychologists contemplated the implications of a species that could simultaneously engage in primitive warfare and advanced theoretical mathematics within the same spatial coordinates. Perhaps she was assigned to calculate trajectory patterns, suggested Threndau, grasping for logical explanations. Combat engineering? Weapons optimization? Kethvar reviewed the tactical data. Negative. According to personnel records, this individual holds no military rank, no weapons training, no combat specialization. Academic background exclusively. He paused, checking the files again because surely there had been an error. Professor Elena Valdez, Department of Theoretical Physics, University of New Geneva. What was a university professor doing at a military training exercise? Vexhai demanded. More importantly, Kethvar muttered, what kind of species brings theoretical physicists to combat training? The footage continued running. Combat concluded. Human soldiers regrouped, tended wounded, debriefed with their commanders. Professor Valdez finished her equation, stepped back from the writing surface, nodded with satisfaction, and walked away as if she had been working alone in a quiet library rather than a simulated battlefield. Run personality profile analysis, Vexhai ordered. Cross-reference with existing human psychological frameworks. The laboratory's computational systems hummed through terabytes of human behavioral data, searching for patterns, precedents, anything that might explain why a mathematics professor would treat active combat as background noise to theoretical research. Results appeared on auxiliary displays. Human psychological profile, standard academic type, no combat experience, no military connections, no apparent awareness of having participated in a military exercise. She didn't know, Kethvar realized. She had no idea she was in a combat simulation. How does someone accidentally wander into military training? Threndau asked. More disturbing question, Vexhai interjected. How does someone continue working on advanced physics while explosions happen around them without recognizing the danger? Kethvar stared at the frozen image of Professor Valdez, chalk in hand, completing an equation that his translation systems identified as a breakthrough in gravitational wave manipulation. Her complete obliviousness to mortal peril while simultaneously advancing scientific knowledge represented something his models had never predicted. Request full interrogation protocols, he finally said. We need to interview this individual directly. Should we treat this as an anomaly? Asked Threndau hopefully. Kethvar began shutting down the holographic systems. His 6 optical sensors focused on the image of a human who had accidentally revolutionized physics during someone else's war game. No, we should treat this as a representative sample. The laboratory fell silent, except for the soft hum of cooling computational systems. 3 xenopsychologists sat motionless, each contemplating the unsettling possibility that they had drastically underestimated human psychological complexity, or perhaps more accurately, they had underestimated human capacity for compartmentalization to the point of complete dissociation from physical reality. Schedule the interview immediately, Kethvar commanded, already dreading what other surprises human psychology might have in store for them. And expand our data collection parameters. Apparently, we need a much larger sample size. The interrogation chamber had been designed with psychological intimidation in mind. Harsh lighting, uncomfortable seating, recording devices visible from every angle. It worked beautifully on most species. Professor Elena Valdez sat in the center chair, pulled out a tablet, and began working on what appeared to be differential calculus. "Professor Valdez," began Commander Zethkol, his four arms arranged in a configuration meant to project authority. "You are aware this is a formal questioning session regarding your presence during classified military operations?" "Mm-hmm," Valdez replied, without looking up. "Could you keep it down?" "I'm at a tricky bit here." The three interrogators exchanged glances. Zethkol had broken smugglers, arms dealers, and interplanetary pirates. None of them had ever asked him to be quieter during questioning. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Vexhai from her position behind the one-way barrier, "we should begin with establishing basics, facts." Zethkol activated his vocal amplifiers. "State your name, occupation, and purpose for being at military installation Gamma 7 on the date in question." "Elena Valdez, theoretical physics, and I was looking for a bathroom." She paused in her calculations, finally glancing up. "Are you the person I should talk to about the complete lack of adequate signage in that facility? Because I spent 45 minutes wandering around before I found that room with the chalkboard." "The chalkboard," Zethkol repeated slowly, "was located in the center of an active combat training scenario." "Was it?" Valdez looked mildly interested. "That explains the sound effects." "Very realistic. Though I have to say, using explosive noises during educational presentations seems excessive. Some of us are trying to think." Dr. Kethvar leaned forward from his observation station. "She genuinely has no idea," he whispered to his colleagues. "This isn't deception. This is complete psychological compartmentalization." "You were under direct simulated enemy fire for approximately 37 minutes, Zethkol continued, consulting his notes. "At no point did you seek cover, request assistance, or acknowledge the combat situation." "Combat situation?" Valdez set down her stylus with the expression of someone forced to explain something very simple to particularly slow children. "I was solving a unified field equation." "Do you have any idea how long I've been working on that problem? The gravitational wave interference patterns finally aligned, and you want me to worry about sound effects?" "Those weren't sound effects," Vexhai interjected over the communication system. "Those were explosive devices. Real ones, designed to replicate actual combat conditions." Valdez blinked. "Oh, well, they weren't very effective, were they? Nobody got hurt." "Nobody got hurt," Zethkol said carefully, "because it was a training simulation with safety protocols." "Right, so no actual danger. Why would I interrupt my work for pretend danger?" She returned to her tablet. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm trying to work out the practical applications of what I solved yesterday. Fascinating stuff, really. The energy output calculations alone." "Professor Valdez." Commander Zethkol employed the tone he usually reserved for announcing execution orders. "During your time in what you perceived as a quiet study room, did you notice approximately 40 armed individuals engaged in tactical maneuvers around your position?" "Oh, the role players?" "Yes, they were very dedicated. Some of them were quite athletic, though I did think the costumes were a bit over the top. All that tactical gear for what appeared to be some kind of historical reenactment." Threndau's gelatinous form began vibrating with what his species expressed as existential confusion. She categorized active military personnel as historical reenactors. "How exactly?" Vexhai asked through the intercom. "Did you find yourself in a restricted military facility?" "University tour group," Valdez replied promptly. "We were visiting to discuss collaborative research opportunities. Very nice facilities, though, as I mentioned, terrible signage. I needed to find the restroom, took what I thought was a shortcut, and found myself in this wonderful room with a pristine whiteboard. You have no idea how rare it is to find a whiteboard that size completely empty. It was like finding buried treasure. So you decided to use it, Zethkol prompted. Well, obviously. The equation I'd been working on required significant space for the derivation. I've been carrying the problem around in my head for months. When I saw that beautiful blank writing surface, inspiration struck. Kethavar activated his direct communication link to the interrogation chamber. Professor, during your work on this equation, did you notice anything unusual about your environment? Unusual how? Valdez looked genuinely puzzled. It was quieter than most university buildings, better lighting than my office. The only odd thing was how everyone seemed to be wearing matching outfits. Some kind of team-building exercise, I assumed. The matching outfits, Vexhai said faintly, were military uniforms. Were they? I'm terrible with fashion, though I did wonder why everyone seemed to be carrying toy weapons, rather elaborate props for corporate training. The interrogation chamber fell silent, except for the soft scratching of Valdez's stylus against her tablet screen. 3 highly trained interrogators sat motionless, contemplating the psychological profile of a species that could mistake military assault rifles for corporate team-building props. Professor, Zethkol finally managed, when explosions were detonating in your immediate vicinity, what was your thought process? Thought process? I was thinking about quantum field fluctuations and their relationship to gravitational constant variations. Why would I think about anything else? She paused, looking up with sudden concern. Wait, were those explosions supposed to be distracting? Because if someone was trying to disrupt academic work, that's rather rude. They were training explosives, Vexhai explained weakly, designed to simulate combat conditions for military personnel. Oh, that makes sense. Though you should really warn people beforehand. Academic concentration doesn't just happen on command, you know. Some of us need quiet environments for complex mathematical reasoning. Valdez returned to her calculations. Now, about those practical applications I mentioned. Commander Zethkol looked directly at the observation window where his colleagues waited. His expression conveyed a simple message. This is your department now. Professor Valdez, Kethavar's voice filled the chamber. Would you mind sharing what you discovered during your work yesterday? Not at all. Valdez brightened considerably. I solved the unified field equation I've been working on for 6 years. Turns out the key was accounting for dimensional membrane flexibility in quantum foam structures. The implications for energy manipulation are extraordinary. We're talking about practical applications in gravitational control, dimensional engineering, possibly even localized space-time manipulation. She continued explaining her breakthrough with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a favorite hobby, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just described potentially revolutionary weapons technology to a room full of alien intelligence officers. Fascinating, Kethavar murmured, though his tone suggested the fascination was tinged with growing horror. And you developed this during my bathroom break, yes. Sometimes the best insights come when you're not trying to force them. Just goes to show you never know when inspiration will strike. The chamber fell silent again. Professor Elena Valdez continued working on her tablet, humming softly to herself, while 3 species of highly advanced alien interrogators tried to process the concept of a human who had accidentally revolutionized physics while looking for a restroom. Fleet Admiral Korvexmar had destroyed 7 planetary systems and conquered 43 separate species during his military career. None of them had prepared him for reading psychological profiles that made no logical sense. Repeat that last part, he commanded, his carapace plates shifting in agitation as he reviewed the interrogation transcripts. General Tisserot, her serpentine form coiled around the holographic strategy table, flicked her forked tongue with distaste. The human subject demonstrated complete dissociation from immediate physical threats while maintaining peak cognitive performance under stress. She classified military personnel as role players and assault weaponry as elaborate props. Dissociation, mused war analyst Grex Thule from his position near the tactical displays. This suggests a species capable of maintaining intellectual focus regardless of environmental dangers. Highly problematic from a strategic perspective. Admiral Korveksmar accessed the broader human psychological database their intelligence networks had been compiling. Are we looking at an isolated anomaly or a species-wide trait? Cross-referencing with other recorded human behaviors, reported General Thisoro, her neural implants processing vast amounts of data. Pattern recognition indicates this phenomenon occurs frequently. Archives show human philosophers continuing lectures during artillery bombardments, musicians performing concerts in disaster zones, researchers documenting phenomena while dying from radiation exposure. War analyst Grex Thule highlighted specific case studies on the shared display. Most concerning, human tendency to prioritize intellectual curiosity over survival instincts appears to increase under dangerous conditions. Standard psychological warfare tactics may prove counterproductive against this species. Admiral Korveksmar studied the data with growing unease. Elaborate. Traditional combat psychology relies on fear-based decision-making, Grex Thule explained. Threaten an enemy's survival, and they become predictably defensive or aggressive. But if a species can mentally categorize existential threats as background noise while pursuing unrelated intellectual goals, they become tactically unpredictable, General Thisoro finished. Worse, they may accidentally develop strategic advantages while completely ignoring our military actions. The Strategic Assessment Chamber's environmental systems hummed quietly as 3 experienced military commanders contemplated the implications of fighting an enemy that might not notice they were at war. Valdez's breakthrough, Admiral Korveksmar said carefully, reviewing her translated equations. Our science division confirms these calculations have direct applications for weapons development. Affirmative, Grex Thule confirmed. Gravitational manipulation technology, dimensional engineering, localized space-time control. Any one of these concepts represents a significant military advancement. She developed all 3 simultaneously, while mentally dismissing our combat simulations as sound effects. General Thisoro accessed additional files from their human surveillance networks. Intelligence reports indicate humans regularly make accidental discoveries while attempting unrelated activities. Recent examples: experimental propulsion systems developed during recreational racing competitions, stealth technology derived from architectural acoustics research, defensive shielding discovered during food preservation experiments. They stumble into military advantages, Admiral Korveksmar observed, while pursuing completely non-military objectives. Correct. And their compartmentalization abilities suggest they may continue these accidental discoveries even during active warfare. Grex Thule manipulated the tactical display to show human settlement patterns. Traditional conquest strategies involve disrupting enemy research capabilities through targeted strikes. This approach appears ineffective against a species that conducts breakthrough research during bathroom breaks. War analyst Grex Thule brought up psychological warfare protocols. Standard intimidation techniques rely on forcing enemy attention toward immediate threats. Human subjects demonstrate ability to maintain focus on their chosen priorities, regardless of external stimuli intensity. How do you terrorize a species that categorizes terror as interesting background noise? General Thisoro wondered aloud. Admiral Korveksmar accessed combat footage from recent skirmishes with human forces. Review tactical engagements. Look for patterns consistent with the Valdez phenomenon. The holographic display showed space battles, ground conflicts, and naval encounters. A disturbing pattern emerged. Human forces regularly employed unexpected strategies that seemed to ignore conventional tactical wisdom. They attacked when logic dictated retreat, retreated when victory seemed assured, and implemented technologies that shouldn't have existed yet. Battle of Kepler Station, General Thisoro highlighted. Human forces abandoned defensive positions to pursue what appeared to be scientific sample collection during active bombardment. We initially classified this as tactical incompetence. Revised assessment? Asked Admiral Korveksmar. They discovered our hull composition vulnerabilities while collecting interesting metal samples from our damaged vessels. 3 days later, they deployed weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. War analyst Grex Thule added another case study. Titan mining conflict. Human civilian researchers refused evacuation orders, insisting they needed to complete geological surveys. We assumed they were trapped non-combatants. They weren't, Admiral Korveksmar guessed. They were mapping underground tunnel systems that became the foundation for an extensive guerrilla network. Our ground forces spent 6 months fighting an enemy that knew every cave, mineral deposit, and underground water source on the planet. The strategic assessment chamber fell quiet as the implications crystallized. They weren't fighting a militaristic species with superior technology. They were fighting academics and hobbyists who accidentally developed military solutions while pursuing completely unrelated interests. Recommendation, Admiral Korveksmar requested. General Thisoro's serpentine form coiled tighter around the strategy table. Traditional warfare doctrine assumes rational actors responding predictably to threats. Human psychological profiles suggest they operate under entirely different cognitive frameworks. They don't fight wars, war analyst Grex Thule added quietly. They conduct scientific experiments, solve mathematical problems, and pursue intellectual curiosities. The fact that these activities accidentally produce military advantages appears to be coincidental rather than intentional. Admiral Korveksmar reviewed the psychological profiles one final time. Professor Elena Valdez, who had revolutionized physics while looking for a bathroom. Human soldiers who collected interesting samples during combat. Civilian researchers who refused evacuation because incomplete geological surveys bothered them more than artillery bombardments. Strategic conclusion, he announced, with the tone of someone delivering an execution order. Standard military doctrine is insufficient against an opponent that doesn't recognize they're in a war. The chamber's lighting dimmed automatically as the tactical session concluded. 3 military commanders sat in darkness, each contemplating the unsettling reality that they might have declared war on a species of absent-minded professors who could accidentally destroy them while trying to solve unrelated academic problems. Schedule a full strategic review, Admiral Korveksmar finally ordered, and request additional psychological analysis. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we proceed further. 3 weeks later, Dr. Keithvar stood before the same holographic display that had started this entire investigation, though his confidence in xenopsychological certainties had been thoroughly demolished. The equations Professor Valdez had scribbled during her impromptu physics session now covered every available surface in the laboratory, translated, analyzed, and reverse-engineered by the finest scientific minds 3 species could provide. Final analysis, announced Dr. Queckstall, the recently assigned theoretical physics specialist whose tentacles trembled with barely contained academic excitement. The human subject's bathroom break breakthrough has yielded functional applications in 17 separate technological domains. 17? Dr. Vexahai's crystalline voice carried notes of impending breakdown. Last week you reported 9. We keep finding new implications, Queckstall admitted. Her gravitational wave manipulation formulas led to advances in propulsion technology. The dimensional engineering concepts suggest practical applications for defensive systems, the space-time control mathematics. He paused, his tentacles coiling nervously. Well, that appears to have solved faster-than-light communication. Senior analyst Threndow's gelatinous form had remained motionless for the past hour, a sure sign of cognitive overload. She accidentally developed interstellar communication technology while looking for a toilet. Gets worse, Dr. Kethvar muttered, accessing the latest intelligence reports. Human academic networks have begun peer-reviewing her work. They're treating it as an interesting theoretical exercise rather than revolutionary weapons development. Meaning? Vexhai asked, though her tone suggested she already dreaded the answer. Meaning every human university, research institution, and amateur mathematics hobbyist now has access to technology that took our combined civilizations 3 centuries to develop. Kethvar highlighted communication intercepts from Earth. Current status? Undergraduate physics students are using Valdez's equations for homework assignments. The laboratory fell silent, except for the soft humming of translation systems working overtime to process human academic discussions about that neat dimensional stuff Professor Valdez figured out during her campus visit. There's more, Dr. Quextall reported, with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a natural disaster. We've been monitoring human academic journals for additional applications of her work. Preliminary results suggest humans are using her breakthrough to solve completely unrelated problems. Such as? Kethvar prompted, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Agricultural optimization through localized gravitational field adjustment, medical applications using dimensional membrane manipulation, urban planning incorporating space-time curvature calculations. Quextall's tentacles writhed with scientific appreciation. They're treating universe-altering physics as mundane problem-solving tools. Dr. Vexhai accessed the psychological profile database they'd been building. Pattern analysis confirms this behavior extends beyond Valdez. Humans consistently develop advanced technologies while attempting to solve trivial inconveniences. Examples? Requested Threndow, finally emerging from his cognitive paralysis. Nuclear fusion research originally focused on better lighting solutions. Quantum computing developed from attempts to organize digital photo collections more efficiently. Nanotechnology emerged from trying to build self-cleaning kitchen surfaces. Dr. Kethvar reviewed their species classification protocols, searching for appropriate categories to describe human psychological patterns. Every framework they'd developed for understanding alien intelligence assumed some form of logical priority structure. Humans appeared to operate under a completely different cognitive architecture. Revised assessment, he announced. Humans don't prioritize threats and opportunities according to survival-based hierarchies. They prioritize based on intellectual curiosity and minor personal conveniences. Which explains why Valdez ignored simulated combat to solve theoretical physics, Vexhai concluded. Combat wasn't intellectually interesting. The empty whiteboard was. More disturbing, added Quextall, her breakthrough occurred because she needed to use the bathroom. Human scientific advancement may be directly correlated with biological inconvenience and random architectural features. Threndow began pulsing with what his species expressed as existential resignation. We're fighting opponents whose greatest military advantages emerge from bathroom breaks and poor building navigation. Dr. Kethvar activated the communication systems to transmit their final report to Fleet Command. Strategic recommendation. Humans represent an unprecedented threat model. Traditional military engagement may inadvertently accelerate their technological development through increased inconvenience and intellectual stimulation. Suggested alternative? Vexhai asked. Avoid contact entirely. Human accidental discovery rates appear to increase proportionally with environmental disruption. Active warfare may cause them to accidentally develop technologies we haven't imagined yet. The holographic display shifted to show real-time monitoring of human academic networks. Professor Elena Valdez had published her complete findings in an open-access journal titled "Some Interesting Math I Worked Out While Looking for the Bathroom." The paper had been downloaded 2.3 million times in the past week by humans who thought the title was amusing. Current status report. Dr. Queckstall announced with grim finality. Human undergraduate students are now conducting experiments with localized space-time manipulation in dormitory basements. 3 separate universities have accidentally discovered new forms of matter while trying to improve cafeteria food preservation. And someone in Ohio appears to have developed rudimentary time dilation technology while attempting to extend weekend durations. Dr. Kethvar shut down the holographic systems and began powering down the laboratory equipment. Final psychological assessment. Humans are too dangerous to fight and too curious to ignore. They solve universe-altering problems as background activities while pursuing trivial personal objectives. Recommended classification? Vexhai inquired. Unknown, Kethvar admitted. We don't have categories for species that accidentally conquer physics while looking for bathrooms. The xenopsychology laboratory fell quiet as 4 advanced alien researchers contemplated the uncomfortable reality that the most dangerous species in the galaxy might also be the most absent-minded. Somewhere in the universe, Professor Elena Valdez was probably solving another fundamental problem while trying to find a decent cup of coffee, blissfully unaware that her bathroom break had inadvertently ended an interstellar war before it could properly begin. Outside the laboratory windows, the first human spacecraft were beginning to appear in local space, their occupants undoubtedly wondering if anyone knew where they could find clean restrooms and interesting whiteboards. The age of human accidental dominance had begun.